Hello, my name is Toni Morgan, and I'm a Community Outreach Coordinator for the Alzheimer's Association here in the Hardin County and surrounding area. I'd like to thank Rebecca Akers of the Hardin County Library for inviting the Alzheimer's Association to present this program to you tonight. I'm going to be placing in the comment field the Alzheimer's Association 1-800 number. Should you have any questions, you're always free to call that number. I will also place my email, which is tomorgan@alz.org, in the comment field. I hope you will connect to me and I can connect you to local resources in the Hardin County and surrounding areas. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Amy Kroll, who will be your presenter tonight for the Alzheimer's Association program, Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia. So Amy, I'm going to give my controls over to you.
Thank you, Toni. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Amy Kroll, and I am a community educator with the Greater Kentucky and Southern Indiana chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. I've been working with the Alzheimer's Association for 20 years now. I first began my interest in Alzheimer's disease when I was in graduate school working on a PhD in sociology, and I did some research about family caregivers of loved ones who had Alzheimer's disease. And that really inspired a passion that's turning into a lifelong passion about the disease and who it affects. So I'm here to present a program that gives you an overview of Alzheimer's disease. So let's take a look at what we're going to accomplish for this evening. So our learning objectives are to compare Alzheimer's and dementia. We are going to recognize how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain, look at the risk factors of Alzheimer's disease, identify the stages of the disease, recognize current FDA-approved treatments that can address some of the symptoms of the disease, describe how scientists are working to advance research, and then name the resources available through the Alzheimer's Association. Alzheimer's is a global crisis, and you are likely hearing more and more about it in your personal lives and on the news. Let's start off by saying what you know about the impact of Alzheimer's in the United States. So how many Americans do you think are currently living with Alzheimer's? 850,000, 5.8 million, 12 million, or 3.4 million? If you guessed 5.8 million, you were correct. Barring any developments in prevention or treatment methods, this number is projected to reach 14 million by 2050. Worldwide, an estimated 50 million people are living with dementia. Let's try another question, this time about caregivers. 8 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's. By 2050, this number is projected to rise to nearly 14 million. Here's our next question about caregivers in the United States. So how many unpaid caregivers are there in the United States? 1.2 million, 8.5 million, 13 million, or 16.2 million? And if you answered 16.2 million, there we go, you were correct. These are unpaid caregivers, and this does come at a cost. So more than 80% of care provided at home is delivered by family members, friends, or other unpaid caregivers. Over half of employed caregivers report having to go in late, take time off, or quit altogether due to caregiver demands. These caregivers provided approximately 18.4 billion hours of care last year, valued at more than $232 billion. So you can see that this disease takes a personal impact as well as a financial one. Let's take a look at a little more stats about the impact of Alzheimer's. So we certainly see in those statistics just how important of an issue examining Alzheimer's is. Let's learn a little bit more about Alzheimer's and dementia. So let's look at a question. Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process, true or false? Normal part of the aging process, meaning that we would all, as we age, experience the symptoms of Alzheimer's. If you suggested false, you were correct. Alzheimer's is not normal aging. It is a brain disease that causes problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. Another question. People younger than age 65 can get Alzheimer's. True or false? If you selected true, you were correct. About 200,000 Americans under age 65 are living with younger onset Alzheimer's. In some cases, individuals develop the disease in their 40s and 50s. Let's watch a video of one of our experts, Dr. Heather Snyder, explaining how Alzheimer's and dementia are related.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So Dr. Snyder shows to us that although there are many causes of dementia other than Alzheimer's, about 60 to 80% of all dementia cases are caused by Alzheimer's disease. Next, we're going to look at some care partners talk about why an appropriate or accurate diagnosis was important to her.
Certainly having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning because we began to understand where this was coming from in the brain, where otherwise we would not have known. Like we knew something was happening, but what was it? To give it a label actually helped, although it was a big umbrella. It explains some of the characteristics and symptoms that we were experiencing and seeing.
So while there's not yet a treatment that can slow or stop Alzheimer's, there is great value in seeking an accurate diagnosis so that you know what you're facing and can better understand what to expect. To recap, dementia is a general term for a collection of symptoms that are severe enough to intervene with daily life. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia, and it is not a normal part of aging. It is a progressive brain disease. Let's take a look at what happens inside the brain. Let's hear one of our experts discuss the brain.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alice Alzheimer's described specific changes in the brain, what we call the formation of plaques and tangles. Now, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and is thought to impact memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. The cerebrum fills up most of your skull. It is part of the brain most involved in remembering, problem solving, thinking, and even feeling. There are about 100 billion nerve cells, or neurons, throughout the brain that transmit messages in order for us to create memories, feelings, and thoughts. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to the brain tissue loss or what we call shrinkage, and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss, problems with thinking, planning, behavioral issues, and even at the end stages, problems with swallowing.
So Dr. Hartley explained what happens inside our brains in the case of dementia. So Alzheimer's was identified more than 100 years ago by Dr. Alice Alzheimer, who described the specific changes in the brain, the formation of these plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's causes the nerve cells to die, which leads to shrinkage in the brain. And then these brain changes result in problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. We're next going to turn our attention to some risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. Of course, everyone with the brain is at risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, but there are a few known factors that increase a person's risk of developing Alzheimer's. Let's see if you know which one is the most common. So what is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? Is it genetics, family history, or age? If you selected age, you were correct. Although Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging, age is the greatest risk factor for the disease. After age 65, the risk of Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. 32% of people age 85 and older have Alzheimer's disease. Let's take a look and listen to what Dr. Heather Snyder has to say about these risk factors.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
So we know that age is one risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease. We also know that there are certain populations in our society that are at higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So we know that Hispanic Americans are about 1.5 times as likely as white Americans to develop Alzheimer's and other dementias. African Americans are about twice as likely to develop the disease as white Americans. And the final risk factor is gender. Almost two-thirds of Americans with Alzheimer's are women. So being female also is an increased risk factor. We know that women live longer than men, making them more likely to develop Alzheimer's. However, longevity and lower death rates can only partially explain this difference. Researchers are exploring how genetic differences between men and women may impact this Alzheimer's disease risk. So to summarize, Alzheimer's disease involves the failure of nerve cells, the exact cause of which is still uncertain. However, research has identified risk factors that increase the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. An individual's risk for developing the disease increases at age 65. Family history is a known risk factor. Having a parent or sibling with the disease increases the risk. Two types of genes are associated with Alzheimer's: risk genes and deterministic genes. We know racial and ethnic background, as well as gender, are factors that increase one's risk for developing Alzheimer's as well. Let's take a look at how we understand the stages of Alzheimer's disease. No two individuals experience the symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's disease in the same way. Let's hear from one of our experts, Dr. Hendricks, on why this is the case, as well as some individuals describing what it's like to live in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease.
One of the things that impacts our brain is all the other things that can happen to us as we age. And we know that Alzheimer's, the most common risk factor for getting Alzheimer's disease is age. But we also have lots of other things that go wrong with us as we age. And so how those other health factors impact our brain can also impact how Alzheimer's presents in other people.
So we just heard from Dr. Hendricks that talked about the disease. Here are some individuals living with in the early stages.
It's a different kind of forgetting. It really, really is. It's not just forgetting where I put my car keys. It's much deeper than that. And for example, I cannot read a book. I used to be a voracious reader because by the time I turn a page, I had forgotten what I had read. And if you're reading a novel, you have to know what transpired before it in order for you to continue to read on. And so I can't read a novel. So I've even stopped trying.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. You know, I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with the words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, you know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
I'm like an overachiever and when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
And finally,
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting more, and they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor, and so that becomes a little disconcerting at times, to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
So some very compelling stories from people who are living in the very early stages of Alzheimer's disease. Let's listen to Dr. Snyder talk more about these stages.
Alzheimer's affects everyone differently. As a result, it's difficult to place a person in a specific stage of the disease. However, there are 3 general stages that are commonly referred to as early, middle, and late stage Alzheimer's. In a medical context, you may hear these stages referred to as mild, moderate, and severe. In the early stage of Alzheimer's, an individual may be able to function independently. However, they may start noticing more frequent memory lapses. Friends and family may also begin to notice difficulties in the person, and a healthcare provider may be able to detect problems in memory or concentration by conducting a detailed medical interview. Middle stage Alzheimer's is typically the longest stage and can last for many years. Damage to the brain cells can make it difficult to express thoughts and perform routine tasks, and this can lead to increased feelings of frustration and anger. In the final stage of the disease, an individual loses the ability to hold a conversation, control their movements, or respond to the environment around them. Cognitive skills, that is their memory, thinking, and reasoning skills, continue to decline, and this can lead to personality changes and need for round-the-clock care.
So Dr. Snyder outlines 3 stages of the progression of the disease. Okay. So early, middle, and late are the stages, sometimes referred to as mild, moderate, and severe in a medical context. It really is important to remember that no 2 individuals experience the symptoms and the progression of Alzheimer's disease in the same way. And while symptoms worsen over time, people progress through stages at different rates as their abilities change. We've moved through what the disease is and how impactful it is. Let's start looking at how it is that we can treat the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. So let's ask the question again. Here we go. True or false? There are several drugs available to slow down the progression of Alzheimer's disease. There is no treatment to prevent, treat, or slow Alzheimer's disease. However, there are drugs that address some symptoms. That is the difference there. Let's take a look at and hear from Dr. Hendricks, who will tell us more about these treatments.
There are currently several drugs that are FDA approved to treat the cognitive symptoms associated with Alzheimer's disease. They treat the symptoms, but they don't treat the underlying cause. So eventually people will progress, but they do treat some of the symptoms and help people for a time. So the first class of drugs are cholinesterase inhibitors. These drugs work to prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine, which is a chemical messenger found in the brain that's associated with learning and memory. There are 3 FDA-approved drugs that are in this class of drugs. There's Aricept, there's Exelon, and there's Razodine. There's another class of drugs that modulates glutamate, which is another chemical messenger in the brain that's associated with learning and memory. And this drug is called Namenda. And then there's a final class, which is actually a combination of cholinesterase inhibitors and glutamate modulator, and this is called Namzaric.
So Dr. Hendricks just gave us an overview of several drugs that are available to help manage the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. I'll leave the pronunciation of them up to him. Some of these you might have heard of. They've been around for a while, but of course there's still lots of things that need to be done. So let's move on and talk about how we're advancing Alzheimer's research. In the last decade, researchers have made enormous strides in understanding how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain. Many recent insights point toward promising new strategies for treatment, prevention, and diagnosis. Let's look at some of these paths of investigation.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease is a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
Investigations into lifestyle
I'm excited
factors.
about what we're learning these days regarding lifestyle lifestyle. One of those things that we've seen in the past of things like exercise and nutrition have now started to gain more momentum to indicate to us that it can change your ability to slow cognitive decline. That is really the first stages of Alzheimer's disease. This may include things like social engagement, mental cognitive training. It can be things such as exercise. It can be nutrition. All those things are now starting to point that they will lower your risk for Alzheimer's disease.
And moving toward a cure.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association. All the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day. And I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
And securing the funds.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
Two more topics about research. One is clinical studies.
It's more important than ever for people to participate in clinical studies. The fact is, right now, we don't have an effective treatment to stop Alzheimer's disease. And if we don't have people participating in clinical trials, we never will. And so participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
Sometimes you hear the phrase, it's a failed trial. That means that it didn't hit the endpoint, it didn't achieve an FDA-approved drug. But I would say as a scientist, the only failed trial is one that doesn't give you valuable information. And if the trial is well designed, if it is a good scientific experiment, you get extremely valuable data so that you can plan the next trial and do the next study even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even a cure.
So clinical studies are key to advancing Alzheimer's research. Let's go ahead and recap this full segment on Alzheimer's research. So scientists have increased their understanding of Alzheimer's significantly over the past decade. People living with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers without dementia are needed for clinical studies in order to find methods of prevention, treatment, and ultimately a cure. Both drug and non-drug studies are taking place across the country and online. Trial Match at this website, alz.org/trialmatch, is a free clinical studies matching service. So I want to continue by talking a little bit more about the Alzheimer's Association and what services they offer. The Alzheimer's Association is in communities across the country, providing direct service to individuals and families facing the disease. Our mission is to eliminate Alzheimer's disease through the advancement of research, to provide and enhance care and support for all affected, and to reduce the risk of dementia through the promotion of brain health. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease. The Alzheimer's Association has several resources that are available on the phone.
I've had a couple of phone calls that I've been able to make in to the call center when I've had a couple of quick questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's been a couple of nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, you have questions, you have anxieties, and I was struggling dealing with them, and it's amazing. It was one of the best things I ever did was keeping the call Center on my favorites now. Just to know that there's somebody you can call who is aware of what you're going through.
So you can call this 800 number anytime, day or night, to receive information and support. It provides access to highly trained and knowledgeable staff who can help with education, decision-making support, crisis assistance, and resource identification. Master's level clinicians are available around the clock to provide in-depth care consultations, a free of charge care navigation service offered to families at any stage of the disease, and help is available in more than 200 languages. Our website is also a great resource.
When I went to the Alzheimer's Association website, which is alz.org, there I was trying to find out more about what was Alzheimer's, what really is this disease, what is younger onset Alzheimer's, what is dementia, is there a cure, how long has it been around, how many people are affected by this, where can I go for resources, where can I go for help, what do I do with this, how can I handle this, is there more people like me out there, is there someone that I can talk to if I need to? And there I found the support line that's 24 hours a day. And there I found where I can go for workshops, where I can go and read things and postings that people have done, where I can find out what events is happening in the Alzheimer's Association, where I can see how it's affecting people around the globe.
And then in communities nationwide.
Since I've been diagnosed with dementia, the one place that I know I can go to for assistance and help and support is to the Alzheimer's Association. There are people there that I know by name that I can contact if I'm having a difficult time or if I'm struggling to find some resource, that they will provide that to me.
So as you can see, there's a variety of avenues that one can utilize in order to find some support and information about Alzheimer's disease. The Alzheimer's Association is just a wonderful source of information for caregivers as well as patients. If you're interested in getting involved in the Alzheimer's disease and in the Alzheimer's Association, there's a variety of ways that your talents and time can be utilized. You might volunteer, whether this is a few hours a week or more significant time commitment. Volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association. You might become a community educator like myself, or join your local walk planning committee. You might be interested in advocacy. You can speak out on behalf of the needs and rights of those facing Alzheimer's disease. A trial match might be appropriate for you. If you may want to participate in a clinical trial. To get started with the Alzheimer's Association trial match, a free, easy to use clinical studies matching service, you can go to our website. Finally, you might be familiar with the Walk to End Alzheimer's that takes place in many, many, many local communities across the country, more than 600 communities. The Alzheimer's Association Walk to End Alzheimer's is the world's largest fundraiser to fight the disease. Register today to raise awareness and funds to benefit Alzheimer's care, support, and research at our alz.org/walk website. That concludes our Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia program today. I hope that you are leaving this with a greater understanding of Alzheimer's, and I thank you for joining us.